to the Believe in Badger Football podcast on the Believe Podcast Network, presented by betonline.ag. Once again, I'm Matt Perkins, joined, as always, by Badger legend, the Hebrew Hammer himself, Matt Bernstein. Bernie, how are we doing today?
Man, every day is a holiday on the pod. I don't want to throw my arm up too big because this guy's got an even bigger arm and a very cool sleeve of tattoos, if I remember. But we are thrilled to have, like I would say, watching you was in Madison in person when I lived there was awesome. Getting to know you outside of football was even better. But dude, Garret Dooley, thank you for being here. You guys were monsters over your career, and it was exciting. And I also think you started kind of this trend of like, we're going to be the best defense in the land. So thanks for joining us. We'll talk about it, but it's a pleasure to have you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys. It's good to see you guys. And Matt, it was good to see you on the field a couple weekends ago. That was great to get back up to Madison, and the environment was fantastic there. I got to bring my 8-year-old boy out there, so he was starstruck to see where I got to play every single weekend. So it was awesome.
Yeah, that's so cool. That's
fantastic. Well, we will hear all about that and more in just a minute. But before we get into that, I want to remind you guys that we are brought to you by betonline.ag. BetOnline remains your number one site to put in all of your sports wagers, especially with football in full swing. The NBA is back. NHL is back. I don't know if you guys are hockey guys. Bernie's from New York. I don't know if you're a Ranger fan or something like that. Who knows? No matter what your sport is, esports, golf, you name it, they've got it over at BetOnline. Head on over to the website, betonline.ag, or use your mobile device to sign up today and use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, to receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. Garret, I know you went to high school in Rochester, Illinois, but did you grow up in Illinois, or did you guys move around first?
We moved around a little bit. I was born in El Paso, Texas, so that's where I kind of started. My dad was stationed down there at Fort Bliss, stayed there for a couple of years. I don't even remember being in Texas, to be honest. But then we moved over to Danville, Illinois, and then Pontiac, Illinois, spent about 8 years there. And then after that, 2008 was when we moved to Rochester. So pretty much been there ever since.
Wow, dude. Okay, that's amazing. So like, what's young Garret? Is he athletic? Like, does he like sports? Is he into home decoration? Like, what's a guy who moves around? Like, how do you kind of reinvent yourself in the athletic realm?
It was, so definitely growing up. I mean, I was dressed in football gear ever since I was in the crib. So that part really hasn't changed. Football was always a big part of our lives. Specifically, growing up, college football was my dad's passion. Ironically, we grew up huge Nebraska Cornhusker fans. So that all changed a little bit as soon as they switched over to the Big Ten. And then obviously Wisconsin was in my future. So, but loved football ever since the day I was born. Got to start fourth grade, and that was the first year I played football. And I mean, ever since then, it was live, breathe football all the time. Football and baseball were my two biggest sports. I played those all through high school. And to be honest, it was I had my ups and downs. I started out as a big kid. I was my first few years, I never got to carry the football. I was what we called a striper. But then once I grew into my body a little bit, I'd say I went through waves. And once I finally grew into my body, got to high school a little bit, that's when I started to touch the ball and got to score some touchdowns. So it's been a little bit of a roller coaster whenever I was growing up through the ages. But once I finally got a little athletic, then I was able to, coach allowed me to touch the football.
Yeah, Matt Perkins, imagine if you're on your team and like, we're like, hey, we're getting a new guy today. And usually like, you're like, oh yeah, okay, who's this guy going to be? And then all of a sudden Garret Dooley shows up and you're like, oh man, we're going to compete to win games this year. What are dudes on your team in Rochester like, thank you for coming? like what? I don't know, like, I don't even know what that feels like. But like, what was that like, the transition? I mean, you've obviously been to a bunch of places, but to your final stop, what was that like? Like, how happy were your teammates and your coaches?
I will say it was weird at first. it was right before my 8th grade year, new town, new school, didn't have any friends. So sports is really what got me to be able to connect with a lot of people. And to be honest, I think that's really kind of how it works with a lot of kids nowadays. I think sports really brings you together. It allows you it allows you to, make friends, get close with everyone. Cause I think football really overall is the biggest team sport. I've won championships in my life, and on those teams, we were the closest group. So, you're really able to help make your friends in the athletic world. And so when I first moved to Rochester, it was a little weird just because I didn't know anybody. My dad was helping coach, same thing. He didn't know anybody either. But I really started, I think football was that first summer was where people really, got to know me. They obviously knew I was a good athlete and I was going to, be able to help the team. But I will say my athleticism didn't really kick off until 2011 was really when that's really when I started to take off and grew a few inches, put on about 45 pounds of muscle, and then the rest is history from there. So,
well, that'll always help. Now, were you playing linebacker the whole time, or do they have you moving all around? I mean, I assume like by that time you added a couple inches and put on 45 pounds of muscle. You're probably the most athletic guy on your team. And if I know anything about high school football, it's, well, the best athlete, we're just going to put the ball in his hands and let him run. So were you playing quarterback, running back too, or what were you doing on the field in high school?
So definitely not quarterback. That's never been in my past, unfortunately. So, but I played a lot of running back and wide receiver. Linebacker was I played defensive end when I first started with football, but then linebacker is basically where I went all through high school. And so, played linebacker, running back, and we ran a no huddle, empty it out a lot. So I played a lot of wide receiver too. I was thankful enough, got to, I think in my career, I scored north of 70 touchdowns in high school. So I got to tote the rock a little bit.
That's what we call Matt Bernstein numbers.
No, Matt Bernstein, I haven't added them up in a while, but I think they were in the 60s.
Yeah, but
so
you had back-to-back 2,000-yard seasons, man. Like,
and I played in half those games. But we're not talking about me. We're talking about Mr. G here. Dude, it says, first off, well, when did it like click in your head? You're like, I could potentially take this to the next level. Like, to me, that was such a cool moment, but also like I was getting letters from these small schools. So I'm sure you were too, like as a 10th grader.
Yeah.
And you're like, I don't know if I want to go play at, like this weird school I've never heard of. And then all of a sudden you like start being better at football. Sometimes it doesn't click like, oh yeah, I could do it on the next level, but you start getting some of these bigger asks and it's like, oh wow, maybe I could. What was that like for you?
So mine was kind of twofold. I didn't start my sophomore year of high school. Sophomore year, so that was 2010. That was one of Rochester's best football teams we've ever had. That was Rochester's first state championship. We had a really tough road that year. And when we were in the quarterfinals, I think we won that game. It was like 21-19. And it was an absolute mud pit. In that game, in the first half, the outside linebacker that was in front of me, he was a senior, he tore his MCL. And so middle of the game, it's a close game. We're competing to try to get to a state championship. And they looked down the line, and I was probably 5'8", 145 pounds. And they basically said, who's the backup? And it was me. And so I went in there and I ended up having, I think it was like 7 tackles, a sack. I ended up having a really good game. And so after that, and I ended up playing the next couple of weeks, got to play in the state championship and everything. So after that game is when I really thought that I could at least play football at the collegiate level. But I wouldn't say that at a high football level. I don't think it clicked in my head until right before my junior year. I had busted my butt in the weight room. I mean, you couldn't keep me out of Gold's Gym. Like I said, I put on 45 pounds of muscle. I mean, I was there 11 p.m., 7 a.m., whatever time I needed to get there. And, we had a 7-on-7 that we went down to Vanderbilt University and we played in. And the linebacker coach at Vanderbilt pulled me aside after one of the games and they took me down into like the locker room and they got my measurements and all that kind of stuff. And he started talking to me about things. And I think that's when I really started to kind of think that I could potentially play at a high level. I didn't have any offers going through my junior year or anything, but after the season ended up finishing, we won our second state title. And then the offers kind of started to come in a little bit. That's really when I finally knew.
Did Vandy end up being that first offer?
No, they didn't. To be honest, we were that was one of the things that my dad was a little upset over, because they had a couple scouts come to my games throughout the season, just never really pulled the trigger on it. And I know you guys know how it goes, but it's kind of a copycat league. Once one team offers, and then it starts to kind of waterfall a little bit, or snowball. And so the first place that actually offered me was Northern Illinois. And I'm not going to lie, I went up there on a visit and I loved it. Northern's a great place.
DeKalb is underrated as a town. There's some fun stuff to do in DeKalb. I feel like cornfields.
Right, exactly.
You guys love cornfields, obviously. You love Nebraska. I've never even heard of DeKalb, but I know Northern Illinois.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it was fun going up there. I got my first offer. That was actually Dave Doran was the head coach there at the time. And so, I mean, I was pumped and just excited to be able to have that opportunity. But what's ironic was that the next day I was going up to Madison for a visit. And that was when Bielema was coaching, and they had no idea that I was at Northern the day before. So when Bielema offered me, it made me feel really almost like I was getting my first offer again, because they didn't know that I had gotten offered the day before. So really that's really when, when I got that offer from Bielema, when I was sitting in his office, I mean, that's really when it kind of hit me. And that's when I knew that I was going to be able to have the chance to play at a big time program.
Dude, that's so cool. You had one, you went up, you probably didn't tell them. And then they're just like, listen, we're going to take you off your merit. We don't know anything else. We're taking you because we want you. That's exciting.
Yeah.
But was Wisconsin on the radar? Like, what were your top choices? I mean, Vanderbilt might have been up there just because they showed interest, but like, were there other was Nebraska on the list? Like, were there other places that you're like, man, these places?
As someone who follows recruiting,
one.
I remember for some reason Indiana being very involved in your recruitment.
So that was close. It was actually, so Indiana State they wanted me to dual sport. They wanted me to go play baseball and football. Yeah.
What was your baseball position?
I played third base.
Okay.
Yeah. So hitting was definitely more up my alley than the fielding part. But I don't know. Baseball, I thought baseball, football would have been a tough combination in college. So I didn't end up going that route. But in terms of, so my recruiting process was first of all, it was really short. I was only getting recruited for about 2.5, 3 weeks before I pulled the trigger on Wisconsin. I was actually the first commit of our class. So, nice. But for me, it was season over. My dad took everything by the horns. He made my highlight tapes. He put together everything. He was reaching out to coaches. He was sending my highlight tapes to people. And for about a month and a half, we heard nothing. I mean, there was nothing that came through. So we started to get kind of nervous, especially after the year that I had my junior year. And so, but it turns out my dad kind of screwed up when he was sending out the highlight tapes. And so it didn't get anywhere.
I hope you still give him crap about that.
What happened? He just didn't post it right? He didn't postage it correctly?
He tried sending it to a bunch of coaches' emails he probably sent it to 100 different universities and didn't hear back. And I guess it just didn't send properly. So he was kind of having a little bit of a panic attack. And obviously I was too, not good enough, like that type of thing. So, but he resent it all. And then, gosh, I'm blanking on the name right now. The defensive coordinator for Wisconsin at the time, that was in 2011 with Bielema.
Was it Partridge?
I think it might have been, yes. And he responded and he wanted me to come up that weekend because they were having junior day. And so that's really when, so that was when, we booked NIU, we booked Wisconsin, and we were going up that weekend. But in terms of what I had kind of on my radar, really Wisconsin, Nebraska, and Penn State were my big three. Was really who I was looking at. I obviously, being from Illinois, I got asked a lot if I was going to go to Illinois, but Champaign was never really on my radar.
So what was that first trip like to Madison? Was that your first time in Madison?
It was, yeah. So we went, I think it was end of February. So, bitter cold up in Madison. You've got all the trucks and the tents on both sides of the lake. But we drove that. I can't even remember what the road is, but when you come into Madison between the two lakes,
John
and just
Nolan?
right there. Yeah. So I was starstruck right there. I mean, you can see the campus, you can see how gorgeous it is. It's obviously a live, active campus with the amount of people that bike, run, ice fish, even in the winter. So just that initial impression was huge. And then my family was always really big on academics. At the time, I was potentially thinking about going engineering until I figured out what the requirements were. Chemistry is not up my alley. So, so academics was huge, and just the history of the program and the fact that it was really only 3.5 hours away from home. I wanted to make sure that my family had a chance to come and see me. If I wanted to go home, I could. And so, I mean, to be honest, I thought about it for a couple of weeks, but it was the best decision I ever made. And I pulled the trigger I think it was 2.5 weeks after I got that initial offer from them.
But you still had your senior year to look forward to.
I did. Yeah. So that was one thing I wanted to make sure that I was committed and that I had my choice well before my senior year, because I just wanted to go out and play football that year, not have to worry about, what I was doing for school, trying to decide between places. I wanted to get that part done with. And I wanted to just make sure that I was there and focused on myself and focused on our team being as good as we could be.
Dude, me too. I signed up my junior year to go to Wisconsin. I don't think I was nearly as smart as you. I just said, yeah, that's cool, I'll go there. And it just happened that, you can go play football. And that's when I had 2,002 yards, Matt Perkins, playing half the games. We played 11 games, and at halftime, usually I didn't play anymore.
There you go.
I kind of wish I did. It would have been great. But dude, you were, I love reading, everything online. It brings me back, and then it gets me so excited because I don't know half this stuff about you. But dude, what are you, number 18 inside linebacker according to ESPN?
That sounds about right. Yeah.
Oh my dude, that's amazing. Number 22 by scouts, 25 by rivals. We got to call Clint. That seems way off.
He wasn't working there then. You can't blame Clint.
I can't blame Clint.
You can blame Mike. You can blame Mike, who's been on the podcast. You can blame Mike Farrell for that one. No, one of the questions I want to ask you, Garret. So you're the first guy to commit in that class. That's all. It's a little bit strange. That's a linebacker. Typically, it's a quarterback, right? In a lot of classes, you see it's the quarterback commits first, and then starts to try to text guys and bring guys in, right? Now, this wouldn't have happened when Bernie and I were in high school because we're old and we didn't have cell phones. But so what did you take on a role of trying to recruit other guys to be in the class, especially other guys with you, other guys from the state of Illinois in that class? Did you sort of take on that role, I guess, if you will?
No, I wish I would have, but unfortunately that wasn't really my strong suit. There were a couple other guys in our class that definitely did take on that role.
So who was doing that?
I think the biggest and most active one was Cichy Obashi.
One of my favorite people in this world.
He is he's one of one. There's nobody else in this world that's like him for sure. He was one of my groomsmen at my wedding, and you can ask all my buddies, Joe, Jack, Troy, Matt. I mean, they're all gonna say Cichy is a different person. And so he was really the one that would, Facebook. I can't even remember what exactly was popular then. Maybe Facebook Messenger. I don't even remember if MySpace was still a thing at that time. But he, text message threads like, "Hey, looking at, we're going up to Wisconsin for a visit this weekend. Would love to try and get everybody there. That type of thing." So, but for me, Wisconsin only had one scholarship to offer at linebacker. And so we had, I think Ramish initially came on as a gray shirt linebacker and then moved to fullback. And then I think Leon Jacobs had came in as a fullback. And And then that's when TJ Watt was still at tight end. So we didn't have many linebackers. Jack Cichy was a walk-on. So yeah, that was the only scholarship at linebacker. So if I wanted it, I needed to take it as soon as possible.
So speaking of, the few scholarships available, I'm going back and I'm looking at the rosters from the year you played. And the linebacker room was so ridiculously stacked. I mean, it has been for a decade, right? It has been for a decade. Like,
yeah.
Okay, we're a little bit biased here, right? We're the Believe in Badgers podcast, but I think that there's a pretty darn good claim that Wisconsin is LBU now.
100%.
I think, more guys going into the draft every year, undrafted free agents being signed by teams every single year and contributing, and just the amount of guys going into the league playing at a high product level at college. Like, what was the competition like once you get there? Like, I mean, I'm going to ask about Leon Jacobs later because he's one of my favorite players from afar. But what's like the competition and the vibe in that room once you get on campus?
Well, tell us who's in the room for everyone who doesn't know.
So, freshman year, the inside linebacker room was Chris Borland, Ethan Armstrong, Marcus Trotter. Oh my gosh, why am I'm blanking on his name right now? Landish. I think Mike Taylor was in the room. I think he was either that or I think he hybrid a little bit with outside linebackers. Jack Cichy was in the room. He was, he was a walk-on.
And Beagle are around, but they're playing outside, right?
They were outside, yeah. Okay. So they were in a different room at the time. But I mean, like you said, I was the number 18 linebacker coming in. I played inside linebacker at Wisconsin for 3 practices. If that shows you.
Well, listen, that's okay. I mean, you got moved from inside to outside. It's a little bit different, but it's still a linebacker.
It was the path was actually a little interesting. So first practice of pads, first drill of pads, and I blew my knee out. And so it was Badger drill, just got locked up, and unfortunately my kneecap went the other way. That was pretty much the end of my inside linebacker. I played on scout team for the rest of the year at inside linebacker, but that was my last year at inside. Coach Anderson switched me to a 4-eye defensive lineman after that.
For one season, right? Or like 2 years or something like that. I remember that vaguely.
Yeah. So it was kind of weird, but I weighed about 230 pounds. They wanted me to get a little bit lighter. Lost a couple of pounds. I think I got down to like 225, and then they switched me to defensive end and at a 4-eye. And so then they wanted me to put weight back on. And so I was slamming the shake, slamming the water to make weight, all that kind of stuff. And my body just isn't meant to hold that much. And so, for me, tried to get to the weight that I needed to, continued to battle the knee problems, and then ended up having surgery on the knee. And then after Coach Anderson left and Coach Chris came in, then that's when Aranda switched me to outside linebacker.
How excited were you?
Oh, I was pumped. I could not have been more excited. I mean, I knew I was, it was going to be different because I was going to be edge rushing, and that was something that I wasn't used to. I hadn't done a whole lot of it, but it meant that I was going to be playing linebacker. It meant that, I wasn't going to have to continue to try and force weight down my throat and just really try and pack on because I was uncomfortable at that weight. So it allowed me to play at a place that, I felt comfortable. And that was really the big thing. It wasn't more so about weighing a specific amount. It was more so about what you're comfortable with and what you can play fast at. So that's what I was super excited about, was that I was going to be able to get back to, just being me.
What was the hardest part of the transition for you?
Which part specifically?
Oh, going from inside to outside, or DN to then outside. Like you mentioned the rush. Mm-hmm. To me, that seems like a very different position than inside linebacker.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
It's I would say the pass rushing was the part that was the hardest. Setting an edge and just that was more so just about technique and using your hands and feet and being aggressive. And you can set an edge even if you're naturally an inside linebacker. But for me, I had never rushed on the edge. I didn't know how, and especially going from never doing it before to going against offensive linemen like Rob Havenstein, Dave Edwards, a lot of the guys on the edges that turned out to be really, really good players in the NFL. And so, those who are at Ryan Ramczyk, I mean, shoot, he's an all-pro tackle now. And so, I think the reason why I got to where I did was because I went against those guys every single day. But I remember whenever I was first learning how to pass rush, I was not very good at it. I mean, that was not a skill that naturally came to me. I had to work every single day at it, trying to bend the edge, trying to work my hands. It was something that really took some time for me to develop and, get to the point to where I actually felt confident in being able to get to the quarterback.
Well, I mean, that certainly paid off. You had a 3-sack game against Northwestern. So, I mean, you definitely put in the work and got the results. I want to go back to scout team, though, because a lot of my favorite stories that I hear from guys who have on the show come from their time on scout team. What was your scout team experience like? Do you have any memorable moments, either welcome to college football or holy crap, how did I get myself in this situation?
So I think personally, my welcome to college football was when I came up on an official visit, and I was committed to Wisconsin, but I was on the field with he was my high school quarterback, and it was his dad and my dad, and we were there for a game. And I walked onto the field and I saw the offensive lineman warming up. That was my welcome to college football right there, because I was like, holy crap, it's going to be less than a year and I'm going to be going against these guys. So that was my first initial reaction there. But in terms of scout team, I think Kyle Costigan was the welcome to football. He was not afraid to use his head, and he was gonna. I mean, when you as a linebacker had to go and show the offense what that team's defense is doing that week, and Kyle Costigan was pulling around, and you had to just basically wear it on the chin. Every single day. That was not fun.
It was fun for him.
It was fun for him, 100%. But I know a lot of other linebackers who would probably say the exact same thing, because I think he was our least favorite lineman to go against.
Oh my God, I'm sure he was a monster.
He was.
Still is.
Unfortunately for him, he just the injuries kept nagging at him. He would have been a heck of a player, but his head. I think his head was made of steel, to be honest.
It's funny, those welcome to college football, because it doesn't always have to be hits. It's you had yours standing on the field, look at these ginormous linemen, which I definitely was like, oh my God, I used to be the biggest guy on the field. Right. And then you come in, you're like, Ben Johnson's like 6'8", 320 and just looks
yep.
me. But mine was more like physical. It was like, we got there and JD's like, all right, today's the day you were running on the stadium. And we were running up and down the upper deck, and I was dying. And I'm like, I don't know, physically, like I'm not in shape for this, but I thought I was in great shape coming in. So that was my welcome. Listen, I'm a physical dude. I'm sure you are too, playing linebacker. I was never scared to get hit by one of these guys, but the absurd, like the 300-yard shuttle we had to do, any of the tests, like the running tests, I was like, this is a failed. I'm going to get yelled at for this.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point with that. I will say the first ever lift that I had, that was when it was Evan Simon was the strength coach, and Jameel Walker was one of the assistants. And as a freshman, it was not fun to have Jameel as your coach, because he was letting you know that you were a freshman and that you were that basically you were the new buck on campus.
Yep.
And so we had to do a pull-up progression our first workout, and the next day I couldn't lift my arms over my head. My lats hurt so bad. But we had what was called we progressed to 4 quarters, and it was basically prowler pushes and different shuttles, 5 to 10 yard shuttles that we would have to do, and each group session was a quarter. And so our first conditioning on a Friday was 1.5 quarters, and I thought I was going to die. And you can ask Cichy too. He about passed out in the middle of the field because it was so difficult. But then, obviously, as you get that first workout in, and then it gets easier and easier. I mean, and after 4 or 5 weeks, we built up to 4 quarters, and you look back on it and you thought that the first workout was difficult, but like you said, that physical part of it with the workouts was nowhere near high school football. It was a whole different level.
But to what you're saying, like, I walked in the locker room like, man, these guys are men. Like I'm 18 years old, and that is a 22-year-old man child in there, which is definitely shocking coming from like the high school area. Okay, so like let's get back to like I'm so interested in like this outside progression. So when does it start clicking? You're like, man, I'm starting to get it. I'm going against some of these NFL, stars. Well, they weren't stars yet, but they were stars at Wisconsin. You're like, man, I'm doing it. Who's like there? Who's like very influential? Like who's an influential person in the outside linebacker room that's helping you? Is it the coach? Is it players?
I thought one thing that I really took pride in myself growing up, even ever since I really started working out in 8th grade, was anything that a coach tells me, anything that somebody tries to teach me, I'm going to try and soak in as much of that information as possible so that I can show them that I'm going to at least try and do what they're wanting me to do to try and get better. And so Coach Tim Tibesar, he was my coach for 3 years. And to be honest, I wouldn't have gotten where I did without him, because he knew that I was going to take I was going to take a lot of those coaching points, and I was really going to try and work on them and try and really perfect my craft. And so I think, and he'll say it to this day, he said it whenever we had our senior banquet, that I was, and again, this is something I take pride in, is that I was one of the most coachable people because I really wanted to learn. I knew I was never one of the most physically gifted. I was never one of the most athletically gifted, but I was one of the people that worked my butts off. I was gonna watch film and try and get as good as I possibly could. But the only way to do that is by taking coaching and by working on it at practice and not being afraid to try new things. And especially in the pass rush games, you have to be able to try. You have to, expand, get out of your comfort zone and try different things, because otherwise the same classic things aren't going to work. And so he was one person that was extremely influential, but just watching Joe Schobert play and just the way that he carried himself, he wasn't cocky. He was super, kept to himself, very humble. And, but he worked his butt off. And to be honest, a lot of the times it didn't even look like he was going 100%, but he just got past people like it was nothing. And so I really tried to just watch him and take some of that in, because he got to play at a really young level, came in as a walk-on, and obviously he's had a continued success in the league. And so he was someone that I really tried to just mold my work ethic off of and just kind of watch him at practice, because he could play everything. He could play inside linebacker, he could play outside linebacker, he was fast enough to play safety. So between Joe and Coach Tibesar, I think those were two of the guys that really helped me get to where I did.
That's awesome, because I'm looking at some of these pictures that they have, the banner keeps going by. Dude, you played with some of the best dudes I think to ever play linebacker. Van Ginkel, Chris Orr, Leon. Who else was on here? TJ.
Yep.
Who am I missing? Like, you're literally played with
Jack Cichy, TJ Edwards, Joe Schobert, Vince Beagle. I mean,
it's like everyone you
both Trotters, right? Both the Trotter brothers.
Both Trotter brothers, Chris Borland. I mean, it was, it was basically never ending. And so for me, as a young kid, it was, first of all, I wanted to try and, learn from a lot of these different guys, but also it was scary because you saw all the talent around you and, you had to find a way onto the field. And especially for me, I battled injury problems early. It was not an easy adjustment for me when I first got to college. And to be honest, it never really clicked for me that I could play, once I got to Wisconsin, that I could play at a high level like some of these guys, really until the middle of my junior year when I got my first shot to start, which first starting game was at the Big House. So welcome to college football.
Okay, so let's talk about that. So, what is you're starting your first game in front of 110,000 fans in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Did you have I assume your parents came up for the game? Were your parents able to be? So, what was that experience like for you to be on? I'm starting a Big Ten game in front of my family, in front of the whole crowd. What was that emotion like for you?
So it was a little crazy leading up to that game because it was Thursday night. We were playing on Saturday. Normal week, Vince is starting. TJ Watt is starting. And then there's me and Zach. Oh, Zach Bond's another one. He was in our room with us too. And so
just another second rounder.
Right. And so it's me and Zach Bond as the backups. And that was one thing. Coach Tibesar did a great job of rotating in players to make sure that, if something were to happen, you had game experience. You probably got anywhere between 12 to 15 defensive snaps a game, and then you had your special team stuff. And so leading up to the game, normal work week. And I remember I was sitting in Matt Miller's room because we were roommates, and it was me, Fumagalli, Joe Ferguson, Jack Cichy, Matt Miller. I think we're playing like Madden in the room. And then it's Thursday night at like 8:00. Troy Fumagalli walks in. He goes, "So you ready to play on Saturday?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm ready to go." He goes, "Well, good, because you're starting." And I was like, "What?" And I was like, "Well, no, I'm not. Like, Vince is starting." He's like, "No, Vince broke his foot. He's out for a couple of weeks." And I just go, okay. Like, I kind of need to confirm this. And 5 minutes later, got a text from Coach Tibesar. And so Thursday night before Saturday is when I learned that I was going to be starting at Michigan. And so nerves were there. That's for sure. Obviously we were undefeated at the time, facing one of the best Michigan teams that they've had. I think their entire defense went to the league. We just came off of beating top 10 Michigan State at their place. And so, we were riding a high wave that, we were going to come into Michigan and really compete. And so there was a lot of nerves leading up to that game, but basically as soon as the first play happened, which ironically I missed a sack on the first play, as soon as that one and that first defensive drive got under my belt, then it was playing football at that point. But I will say that, so in that game, after I finally settled in, I ended up finishing with a good solid game. I think I had around maybe 7 or 8 tackles, had a sack in that game. So that was when, I realized that I could play with these guys. And next week wasn't anything easier. We had Ohio State at Wisconsin. So I think that was the year we faced like 6 or 7 top 10 teams. So,
and you guys held, Michigan was a top 5 team. You guys held Michigan to 14 points. Like that was that was a tough, hard fought game. I think that was one of Hornibrook's first starts too. That was like his second start. Wasn't his first start against Michigan State that week before?
It might have been. Yeah, it might have been. Yeah.
If I remember correctly, it was. I remember a lot of stuff was going on with that team at that time. Yeah, you guys you started with LSU that year. I think that was the Lambeau game. What was it like to play in Lambeau?
That was awesome. That was a lot of fun. Just being in that atmosphere, just because, Lambeau has so much history in it, and you get to, I've been watching it on TV ever since I could remember. So just being able to play in that game, and especially with the way that the outcome was, I was surprised with how well LSU fans traveled, because there was a lot of LSU fans at that game. But it was a great battle and just a fantastic game, and obviously defeating another, that's when Leonard Fournette was there. And so, that was another top 5 team that we had beaten that year. So it was, that was a memory that I'll never forget for sure.
I'll never forget it either. It was so exciting to be, but they traveled. I feel like they brought up more people than even went into the game.
That's what I thought. Yeah, exactly.
It was like almost all yellow. I was like, where is everyone? We're in Wisconsin. Yeah. They drove like their trailers off. It was kind of actually awesome. And they weren't mean. Like they were kind of nice compared to the rest of, some Big Ten schools. So what's your senior year like? And what is is it exciting? Are you thinking about the NFL? Is it a possibility in your mind? What's going on there?
So I would say that the NFL was definitely in my mind at the start of my senior season, just because I had earned a spot last year or the year before, playing with, even when Vince came back, I had done well enough to where basically Coach Tibesar felt comfortable enough to just rotate me in with those two. And so I really was able to earn my spot on that team. and in that rotation. And so I really had the mindset that I was going to be able to, potentially have a shot to go to the league that next year. And so, going in, and especially after losing both Vince and TJ, I knew that I was going to be the leader in the outside linebacker group. Leon had just switched over to outside linebacker from inside. And so, we were going to have 2 senior leaders. And I mean, it was interesting going from a more of a support role to a leadership role. But I had guys like Van Ginkel, who had just transferred in, Zach Bond, who had playing experience under his belt. And so really it just allowed me to kind of just more so just kind of show them a little bit of guidance in terms of how the defense works, and just really about more so work ethic and accountability. And I think that allowed for us to really become a really tight-knit outside linebacker group. Plus I had Leon, who was one of my best friends, on the other side. So, and you look at that dude and you're going to be scared no matter what, because he looks like he was built in a lab.
No one has said anything different.
No, absolutely not. One of my stock questions I asked everyone: who is the biggest freak athlete you play with on the Badgers? And everyone who played with Leon said it's Leon. So,
100%.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. One other guy though that I know a lot of people have talked about who was on that defense, I know was the leader of that defense, was Dakota Dixon. And we've had other people on the podcast say how he was like a big time leader on that team as well. What was he like, sort of on the field as a leader there on that defense, as well as you and Leon?
Yeah, Dakota was awesome. He was really, there was a lot of young guys who played in the defensive secondary. And so the fact Dakota was someone who always worked his butt off, whether it be in school or on the field and in the weight room, whatever it might be. So Dakota always led by example. And so he really was able to bring in some of those younger guys on the, in the defensive back room, and be able to really make it so that they felt more comfortable just watching him play. And he, even though, and we all know Dakota's not a huge kid. I mean, shoot, he was probably 5'8" at his best. And so, but I mean, shoot, he played like he was 6'4". I mean, he was always 100 miles an hour. I mean, he made so many huge plays our senior year. And, obviously he went on to have a little bit of a stint in the league as well. And so, Dakota was someone who just always led by example. And he just allowed for a lot of those young guys to really follow in the footsteps. And again, that Wisconsin team, I think we were just, it didn't matter if we were on offense, defense, linebackers, defensive line, whatever. We were all so close together. And I think that's what allowed us to have so much success and have a 13-1 season. And to be honest, and again, football, like I said at the beginning of this, football is my favorite sport because it's really the biggest team sport that you're going to play. And it's going to teach you things that is going to pertain to your entire life, whether it be in sports, school, work, family, everything. And so that's why I loved those teams that I played with, because we were all so close together.
What made you guys so close?
We weren't scared to just basically be around each other and just really try and really just learn where everybody came from. And so like obviously my high school buddies, I knew just because I grew up with them and I already knew kind of what their stories were. But I would say that, even my first few years in college, I never really got to know a lot of these guys. And maybe it's because I didn't feel comfortable enough to where, I was that I felt like I was really making my presence known on the team as a leader, as a performer on the field. And so maybe in that sense, I had a little bit of a back seat. So I didn't get to know as many people, but it felt like I really understood where a lot of these guys came from and what their stories were. And, one of our biggest things was, what's your why and why do you do this? And so, whether it be wider, you didn't have a whole lot of and I've been on plenty of different teams where each position group kind of hangs out with each other. But for us, it wasn't that way. It was DBs, wide receivers, running backs, linebackers, everybody was, hanging out, whoever it might be. And we weren't afraid to hang out with different groups on the weekends or, we always, and we called it the Fat Boy House. We'd go over to the offensive line room or the offensive line house, and we hang out with them for a couple hours, and then we'd go walking down Cichy with someone with Dakota Dixon and Derek Tyndall and that type of we really just had a close group all around, and we didn't have any issues, just hanging out with different groups of people, and just really, again, understanding where everybody came from and why football and that team was so important to everybody.
It's a good group of dudes. I remember, and especially you named your suite mates or who your roommates were. Mm-hmm. That's a good group. Just to hang out with, to be around, it's a fun group.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned Jack Cichy, one of my favorite. He's such a nice guy. Mm-hmm. How excited are you for him to be part of this team that you're looking at now? And I guess you don't have to share everything, but I was out there and he was yelling at a coach, and I was, and he was on doing the scout team book. And I'm like, man, I wish I had someone who would yell at a coach or, to just say the scout team's not wrong. This card is stupid, or this card's wrong. What do you think the guys are getting from Jack?
Well, I think what's good about Jack is that he's and we're kind of at the back end of our generation. And I will say that we're kind of a hybrid, because we're a little bit old school, but we also have that new school part of us too. And so Jack obviously played a few years in the league, and he's still only 27 years old. And so he's able to really relate to a lot of the younger guys. Even though he's not technically still in college, he's still able to talk to and relate to a lot of these 18, 19, 20-year-olds and be able to connect with them in a proper way so that they understand where he's coming from. Whereas, there might be instances where you have an old school coach who might not be able to reach a kid who's now 18 coming out of high school. And that's just because of the way that kind of generations are going right now, and the way that what's going on right now. Sometimes it might make it difficult in that sense. And so for Jack, he has both sides of it. He's very fresh out of playing, so he's been with a lot of new players and younger guys. But then he's also had, he's been with Rudy, he's been with Coach Chris, he's been with a couple of different coaches in the NFL. He's been with Belichick, and so he sees some of the old school stuff that has a lot of success. But then you have to be able to kind of be able to bring in the new a little bit. And I think that's what's great about Jack, is that he has so much football knowledge, but he can relate to anybody. And so I think Jack is getting to learn a little bit on the offensive side as well. And so it's really going to help him understand more because Jack's a defensive guy. We know he's going to end up as a defensive coach somewhere. And so it's going to really allow him to build as a coach. And so I think having Jack in the program is fantastic. And I think it really helps our coaching staff tremendously.
I totally agree, and I think what you said about the kids, or the kids now, but the student athlete, the football player, can relate to him. That's what I love about Jimmy. They can relate to Jimmy. He's been outshining, his whole entire career. He's been outshining everything that everyone's ever said. And I think Jack's kind of the same way. The dude was not, as a fullback, you're kind of licking your chops to see Jack Cichy across. What was he, 210, 215, maybe? Yeah, 200 maybe. He was he wasn't huge. Played the game at a lion though. I just loved. So I love that, and I do love that, and I think that's what Jimmy's building. But we can talk about that a different day, because there's a lot going on the field, which is exciting stuff. But let's talk about. I want to hear your combine experience, and then mine was the worst. So I understand where that's. You don't have to tell us that much, but. Combine, but into, I guess, how exciting it was to, the NFL transition. Mm-hmm.
So Combine was interesting. I will say, that, for anyone who's ever been there, they know that they put you through stress. You don't eat properly. You don't get enough sleep, talking to people. You're answering questions like, would you rather be a cat or dog? I don't know. And so they're definitely putting you through the ringer. You have the meat locker where you get up on stage and you're just in spandex so that they can look at you and, get your height and weight and all that stuff. And yeah, it might seem like, you're getting treated like cattle almost, but you're basically an investment at that point. you're going to the league, competing because it's a business and we're trying to win championships. And obviously, you get paid well in the league. And so, that's one of the big things. But like for me specifically, I knew all of that coming in. My thing is that, they wanted me to be 250 and to run a 4.640. And I thought that sounded fantastic. The issue was I didn't play at 250. I played at 240. And so I didn't get to run a 4.640 at 250. So I will say, and we prepared at training. I trained at Michael Johnson down in Dallas, which was fantastic. They were great people. And, they really helped get me to where I needed to be. But for me, and they said it's when you get ready to run your 40 and you look down that alley, I mean, it literally is like it goes completely silent and it's almost just like a black lane because you have blinders on and it's almost like everyone around you is non-existent. And at that point, I forgot how to run.
Dude, me too. Oh my God. It's the worst. That place is the worst. Also, I ran horribly there. And then we do the drills, and I literally killed the drills.
Yeah.
But the drills don't matter because the 40 time is the only thing that they all look at. I didn't drop a pass. Like I was cutting. These coaches are like, damn, Bernie, get back up. And I was dying. Literally, you can't stop. Like you got to keep going.
Yep.
And then at the very end, they're like, all right, Matt, you got to go back to the hospital. I'm like, no, everyone's packed up and leaving. And I'm in this group and I'm leaving too. They're like, no, we're going to take you back to the hospital for like another 5 hours of tests.
Awful. That's awful.
I was like, man, this is brutal.
That is.
But you know what? I think what you said is what every kid, every dude should hear right now is like, you become an investment and that's it. Like I think some people are more of like, people are, it depends, but still the NFL is a huge investment. It's the no fun league for a reason. Like guys are getting eaten up and churned out. So what was your experience walking into the locker room, being part of that world?
In the NFL?
Yeah.
It was interesting for sure. My first team that I was with was the Vikings. They had just gotten a whole new facility. I mean, the ridiculous amount of money that they put into that place. And so I definitely was spoiled when I got there because everything was brand new. It looked fantastic. And then, you're walking into a locker room with guys like, Kirk Cousins and Adam Thielen, Stephon Diggs, Harrison Smith, Everson Griffin, like guys
Anthony
who
Barr.
are Anthony Barr. You're watching these guys on Sundays and you're seeing the level of play that they're at, and then all of a sudden you're with them. And so that part is a little, that's obviously a little different environment. And I get asked that question a lot. What was the biggest difference that you saw from college going to the NFL? Was it the speed of the athletes? That type of stuff. It really wasn't even the speed. It was, but in a different sense. The biggest difference that I saw was the defensive linemen. I thought that they were they were basically giant human beings that could run faster than me and that were also 50 pounds heavier and 4 inches taller. So watching them play was almost magical, to be honest.
Was there one guy who really stood out as like a unicorn?
Danielle Hunter. I thought he 6'6", 280, 290, whatever his weight was, looked like Leon. And
like 4% body fat, like
right, exactly. Yeah. He ran like he was a wide receiver. He was 6'6", and I think that year he ended up having like 16, 17 sacks, whatever it might have been. And so he stood out tremendously to me.
All right. Well, I know Bernie unfortunately is in the meeting. He's got to hop on too. Garret, we've got a lot more questions for you. So we're just going to have you back. Maybe bring your roommate Leon next time. We'll have another little linebacker session to cut it up. So we cannot thank you enough for taking some time to hang out with us here today and share your story.
Absolutely. I really appreciate you guys having me on. And I'd be happy to come back. We'll get Leon on here. We'll we'll put up some side by sides of him and a robot and see which one's more real.
That sounds great.
That guy, man, if I ever saw him in a bar, it was just an exciting time. He was fun. He would be the speed that I would go when I was in college. Yeah. We'll just say that. But Garret, thank you, man. It was really a pleasure. It was a pleasure seeing you. I think I'm lucky and thrilled to have lived in Madison when you did and got to know you and your roommates, which are all friends, and I still text with Matt Miller from time to time. So I appreciate it, man. I wish you the best of luck, but we got to get you back on.
Absolutely. That sounds great, you guys. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Right, thanks so much. Until next time, on Wisconsin.
On Wisconsin.
There we go.